So before I start, can I just ask a question to everyone and be honest with the answer, right? How many of you have read a book within the last 1 week? Not the complete book, 1 page is even fine. Okay. For students, your textbook doesn't count. Okay, now let's see the hands. All right, still quite a good number. Okay, now if I go back like last 1 month, better, better. Anyone here who hasn't read a book in last 1 year? Oh wow, we have 1, 2, 4, 5 honest person here. Thank you for the honesty, right? All right. So my session today or my speech today is all about books, right? And are they still relevant? Because we're in 2023, we're in the age of internet, we're in the age of YouTube and everything. Are books really relevant in today's world? That's the question that I want to ask, and that's the question I want all of you to ponder after this speech, right? So in my personal view, yes. And I would say it's relevant more than ever. Why? Let me explain this one by one. So first of all, let me accept something, that information is no longer a scarce resource, right? There used to be a time when if you wanted to know what is the capital of Ghana, you had to go to a library and find a geography book and then look through it, right? Now, if I ask you that question, it will take you 1 second to just Google and tell me the answer. So it's that simple. So I understand the information is no longer a scarce commodity. You have Google, as I say. You have YouTube. There are so many YouTube tutorial videos, right? So that's there, information is there, right? And the most recent thing is that ChatGPT, everyone is talking about it, how it's gonna make every profession irrelevant, right? Like if there are coders here, are there any software engineers here, programmers here, coders? Or people learning to be coders? Yeah? So ChatGPT poses a big threat to you guys as well, right? If you give it the right set of commands, it produces the entire code for that as well. So the question is, with all those information sources available to all of us at the fingertip, how are books still relevant, right? That's the question. So first of all, yes, there is information, but there is disinformation and misinformation as well. So what is misinformation? It's basically wrong information that we spread across internet without knowing about it. And disinformation is basically the opposite, where wrong information is spread with knowing, that means with malintention, right? And if you go on social media, you will be full, you'll see there's so much malinformation, misinformation, disinformation. So the point that I'm trying to make, yes, information is so available, but that means misinformation, wrong and malicious information is also available very easily. And as a user, how much awareness do you have to differentiate between right information and wrong information, right? And it's so difficult. So that is why all of us, to an extent, spread misinformation without knowing it, even if we don't have a bad intention. So that's the challenge number one, right? When you talk about internet, when you talk about so much easy to get information, the problem is that misinformation is also quite easy to get. Now, the next point that I want to make, the difference between knowledge and information, and there is a significant difference. Internet is a very good place to get information, no doubt about that. But is it really a good place to get knowledge? Let's understand the difference, right? I'll give an example. So, what is data? Data is basically some points of numbers or some raw data, right? So if I tell you that this particular, the seats that you are sitting on, these are RGB code 8.2 point something, right? That's data which has no meaning to it. Then if we attach meaning to that data, then I'll tell you this is a red color. That means I'm giving a meaning to the data. Now you know this means red. But this doesn't have any context to it. So what? Red means what? Now if I put it to a context to you, that if you see this red color when you are driving on the streets, that means you cannot go. Then that's a context to the information, right? That's the difference between information and knowledge. The moment you add context to your information, it becomes knowledge. It becomes actionable. Now you know if I see red on the street, then I brake or I stop my car, right? That's actionable information. That's knowledge. Now, wisdom is of course applied knowledge. That means if you drive in Dhaka for 10 years, you know that red light, green light doesn't matter. So that's wisdom, right? And you cannot get that from books even. That you have to get by practically doing things. So what I'm trying to say here, information is good, but without context, information doesn't have value, right? And internet, unfortunately, is not really a good place for context. So I'll give you another example of explaining context, right? So context is basically the circumstances, the past and the previous and the future to help you shape that information in a meaningful way. How many of you have read this book? It's one of my favorite books. Okay, Good, few avid readers, Kalvela. So those of you who haven't read it, this is a very bestseller book which talks about the Naxalite movement in India, especially Bengal, within the 60s and 70s of the last century, right? Now, if you want to learn about the Naxalite movement in India and you go to Google, there will be Wikipedia pages and all things, right? Which will give you information like who was the leader, how many people got killed, you know, what happened, how many bombings happened. These are information, but it doesn't give you the context. What Somaresh Majumdar does in this book, he tells you the story from the protagonist, who is basically a young boy who grew up in the North Bengal, in Jalpaiguri. He came to Kolkata, he got admitted into Kolkata University and got into leftist movement. And his life basically portrays the socio-economic and cultural truth of that time in India. And that gives you the context that why so many educated, modern, young generation of India at that time in 60s and 70s went and took up arms against their own country. Without that context, you don't understand this movement, right? You feel these are bloodthirsty terrorists who just, you know, wreak havoc. But the moment you read a book like this, I'm not saying this is the only book, the best book, but the moment you read a book like this, you get the context, the socio-economic and the cultural context that why something like this could happen. And that, unfortunately, you do not get on the internet, right? That is why books come in handy. They give you context, they give you meaning to the information that you have and convert that into knowledge. Now, how reading impacts your mind? First of all, it impacts through focus and concentration. Secondly, it fosters imagination and creativity. And lastly, it helps us in information processing. Let me explain. Focus. What is the average attention span of a human being now? Any guesses? Okay, I'm getting 3 seconds to the lowest extreme and 18 minutes someone said to the highest extreme. You are very hopeful. So, okay, no more suspense. It's around 8.25 seconds as per a 2019 study in the United States. Now, when we talk about attention, we always talk about goldfish, right? He has a goldfish memory, right? Now, what's the attention span of a goldfish? And this is scientifically proven. 9 seconds. So scientifically, human beings right now have less attention span than goldfish. Please let that sink into your mind, right? You are not more attentive than a goldfish in general, on an average. And that has happened because of the internet, right? So books, what books do here? The moment you read a book and you really want to understand the meaning of the book, you have to focus in it, right? It's not like you can play YouTube on the TV and you can walk around the house and play a game on your mobile and you'll understand. When you're reading a book, you have to read it with focus, right? That means reading a book teaches you to focus and concentrate on what you are doing at that very moment. And that has profound impact on your personal life, on your family life, on your social and your national life. Next is imagination and creativity, right? So imagination is basically you as an individual thinking of something that doesn't exist, right? And creativity is taken to the next level. You imagine it and then you bring it to reality. And again, books, because it enhances your senses, it makes you imagine things that you cannot see with your eyes. It allows you to be creative. It allows you to generate new ideas and new thoughts, right? Because when you're reading a book on, let's say, like the one George R. R. Martin wrote, how many of you have read the book by George R. R. Martin, A Song of Ice and Fire? Only one person. How many of you seen Game of Thrones? Right. So it's the same story, right? The series was adapted from the book. So if you read the book, right, you imagine the entire world of that Game of Thrones. You imagine the areas, the people he talks about, the Dothraki and all those things, right? You imagine in your head. And that imagination opens your neurons. That allows you to become more creative, right? The moment you watch it in front of you playing on a screen, there's nothing left for imagination, right? You can see everything. But when you read that book, then your mind works to actually create that picture for you, right? That's what book does. And George R. R. Martin said that a reader lives 1,000 lives. Why? Because you are living the life of the protagonist of that book. You are thinking from his shoes, right? Looking in the world in his eyes. So the person who doesn't read a book basically has lived just one life, right? His own life. So that's the imagination and creativity part. Last part is about information processing, and this is scientifically proven again, right? So what this says is that when you read, right, there are new neural connections that happens in your brain. There are new neural connections, and these neural connections are extremely critical for our, information processing, for critical tasks, problem solving, and all these things. Because again, you're imagining, you're being creative when reading a book, you're focusing, your brain is actually helping to create those neural connections, new and advanced neural connections. So again, the book actually is helping you to sharpen your brain, to make your brain more efficient and more effective. And by the way, I'm not propagating any particular format. I'm absolutely fine people reading ebooks. I personally don't prefer that. I'm an old-fashioned guy. But that doesn't mean that you cannot prefer reading an ebook. Because when I say a book, I mean the format of it, right? The way it is written. It's not about electronic or a print copy. So you choose your format. If you like reading an ebook, perfectly fine. If you like reading a hardcover book, perfectly fine. But the point of it, please read. Please help your brain to imagine things, to become more creative, become more functional, and don't just consume information, try to consume knowledge, because that's what books do to you. So please open a book and get lost into the world of unlimited possibilities. Thank you very much. Thank you.